Hello and welcome to the State of Scottish Football. Yes, we are here. We are slightly delayed, of course, because there has been a bit of an outage across the world. I was about to say how many platforms we're currently live across, but perfectly honest, I'm not too sure how many platforms are currently active. I know Twitter's active and we're active, so we're here nonetheless. Of course, I'm not by myself, thankfully. I am joined today first by Glenn Schroeder. Glenn, how are you doing?
Good, thank you, Struan. Yeah, hopefully whoever's tuning in enjoys what we've got coming up, but if not, it'll be good to dissect the weekend's action with yourself and David.
Good to have a little rant at the end of the day, even if nobody's listening. And of course,
Absolutely.
we're also joined by David Smith. David, how are you doing?
Very well, thanks. And just to clarify, our lovely Amy Canavan has just told us we're live across Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So you'll get us in a range of sites, thankfully. And I'm looking forward to delving into the world of Scottish football with yourself and Glenn tonight.
Well, I think it's only right that we start with Celtic and Aberdeen. And if you want, I can just leave and let you talk about Aberdeen, to be perfectly honest. But I think it's best we start with Celtic here tonight. And David, I'll come to you first. Has this result taken pressure off Ange Postecoglou?
I think so. I mean, it was a very good win for Celtic yesterday. I mean, the assignment at the start of the day, prior to the lunchtime instalment that I told you yesterday, was basically if Celtic don't get the win, there's huge pressure on Ange Postecoglou, especially after recent glum in form, and also first night's defeat to Bayer Leverkusen. Yeah, Bayer Leverkusen are a level above Celtic right now, but also in the same token, Celtic were expected to go and get any sort of result on Thursday. So yesterday was an important game, and I touched upon it with Craig Leach and Grant Campbell on Thursday night with regards to just how important the game was. But no, I mean, Celtic started the game very well. Took the way very early, thanks to Kyogo Furuhashi. Now, I was at the game. I had a very rough sore head. Sorry, I didn't notice Mr. Schroeder was at the game yesterday, so he might be able to have a better knowledge of the game than I will. But no, I mean, it's a good win from Celtic, and Aberdeen did well to equalise. It was a poor goal from a Celtic point of view when you look at it, because Lewis Ferguson took his goal really well, but also Montgomery and Joe Hart could have done better for my liking. But then Celtic did very well to get the winning goal, and we'll get on to Aberdeen, I'm sure. But I mean, Stephen Glass said in the radio post-match yesterday about Jack McKenzie and Calvin Ramsey's inability to defend situations, and I disagree with that, because I mean, if you look at the two goals very closely and in more detail, the first goal was David Bates's predicament, because the ball comes in and Bates isn't dealing with Kyogo Furuhashi, and then the second goal, McCrory's in a breath of fresh air, and the winning goal for Celtic, he's basically given the freedom of Batoji to go and score that goal. But good win for Celtic all the same, and a very welcome 3 points. And Celtic fans were singing renditions of what was it again? This is the day. This is the day we win away, and it just shows where Celtic are at just now, because I mean, that was the first win since Valentine's Day, and love was in the air for Celtic fans yesterday. Yeah, it wasn't pretty, but it was job done, and a good 3 points for Celtic.
Glenn, as David says there, Celtic haven't won since Valentine's Day away from home. It's been seldom they've had these good away performances. And one player in particular who I want to pick up is Kyogo, if you will, of course, a little Thomas Müller impression, but he's been absolutely fantastic. And coming back in, I think the goal was really... I know David Bates is getting a lot of stick, and I think he has to do better in that situation. But I think as well, David Turnbull deserves praise for that ball, because I think that's one of those ones where if David Bates possibly does get connection, he maybe turns it into his own net. But how vital is Kyogo Furuhashi to Celtic up front? Because we've seen in recent years anyway, Celtic have had fantastic strikers. Of course, Moussa Dembele, Lee Griffiths, Odsonne Edouard, they've all been great. And there was kind of a dip towards the end of last season, this season. And Furuhashi's sort of filling that gap, isn't he?
Yeah, definitely. And it's quite convenient. Celtic always have these key players conveniently back from injury when they have to face Aberdeen. It always seems to be the case. And I'm just finished doing my own podcast, Red Tinted Glasses. I've done the review of the game with Colin Watt, who I'm sure many of you tuning in are familiar with his face on this channel, as well as other Celtic podcasts. So be sure to listen out for that coming out tomorrow. But we touched on the importance of Kyogo for Celtic. I think they have missed him in recent weeks, and both him and Jota as well were, two players that kept the ball well and caused Aberdeen's fullbacks, in particular Jack McKenzie, problems all afternoon. yesterday, and I think in the second half we didn't see as much as Kyogo, especially in the first half. I thought he was really influential every time Celtic got forward, but Aberdeen made a tactical switch, and we seemed to keep him quiet. But teams in the league are going to have problems dealing with Kyogo this season, and for Celtic, they'll be wanting to make sure he can stay fit, because as I said there, he was a big loss for them in that few weeks that he was injured, and he seems to be at the heart of everything good for Celtic. And yeah, if they want to get back up the league, he's going to be vital to that part of their success.
You mentioned as well there Jota, who got the second goal of the game. He hit the bar in the first half as well, but I believe Celtic only had 2 shots on target in this game. David, sorry, go on, good.
Yeah, no, I was to say yes. So I believe, which was quite hard to fathom given what the pressure that they seem to be under. But it was a point that David brought up. I actually want to disagree on slightly. I actually do think the fullbacks were at fault for the goal. Stephen Glass was quite vocal on the inexperience from them. I think Jack McKenzie's got to do better for the first goal. Needlessly,
I'll take your word. I'll take your word.
You were the one that thought it was a draw.
My apologies.
But I do think he's right. David Bates should do better with the cross, but it's maybe a bit of naivety and inexperience, a silly throw in to concede, and there's maybe that not maturity to delay the throw in that Celtic get. But David Turnbull provides the quality on the cross that we didn't heed the warning a few minutes before when Nir Beaton headed past the post.
It's quite an interesting one as well, the fact that Celtic only did have 2 shots on target, because what we've seen from Postecoglou is a very attacking team who are not very good defensively, and once again set pieces where they're undoing. David, how big a concern is this for Celtic? Because this is an issue that goes before Postecoglou. Under Neil Lennon last season, Celtic were absolutely awful at defending set pieces, and they just don't seem to be getting that right at all.
No, absolutely not, and there's a major concern because, as I alluded to, Lewis Ferguson's goal was a good header from Ferguson, but Montgomery and Hart, as I alluded to, should have done a bit better, and it is a worry. But also, Celtic were under a bit of pressure for a wee while in this game, especially in the second half. And I mean, Celtic did wobble at times, and Aberdeen hinted at a winner until a neat move opened up Stephen Glass's side, and Celtic took their winner very well through Jota. But on the set piece front, and it is a worrying situation. And I mean, that's against an Aberdeen side that are low in confidence at this placement at the time, and Aberdeen side that are just struggling to get a result they crave. And that predicament, is a worrying factor. But for both sides, and I'll especially go towards Celtic side of things here. The next few weeks are an opportunity to go and stew things up and work on things, because both sides went into yesterday's game on an anxious feeling. And when I mean anxious feeling, I mean both sides were united just in terms of they've not exactly started the season very well, both in domestic or in European terms. And yesterday was that type of game where it wasn't exactly a dull game by any stretch of imagination, but you looked at the game going, this was an Aberdeen Celtic game in the past where you go, we're excited, blockbuster, brilliant, can't wait for it. Yesterday, there just wasn't that tinge of excitement in the game. And that's got to be a worry for both sides, but predominantly for Celtic.
I think as well what's quite interesting is we're quite far into the season, and this was 6th versus 9th. You don't associate Celtic and Aberdeen being in those positions so far in, possibly 1 or 2 games into the season, but definitely not at this stage. And there was an interesting comment from Brand Warrior mentioning that Julian, Juranovic, Taylor, Forrest and Giacomakis are still to come back in. Those are arguably 5 players who just walk into the first team. And there's quite a few people saying as well last Thursday in the game against Leverkusen that Celtic were missing, 7 of their first starting 11. Glenn, do you think there is a lot of reasons to be optimistic from a Celtic point of view? Not what's on the pitch, but what's actually off it and still to come back on? Because obviously Giacomakis we've not actually seen at all. I don't even know if he exists officially. I think he's maybe made 1 appearance. But we've seen Greg Taylor perform well in that fullback role. We've seen Juranovic do well for us. We know what he can do. And Julian is probably Celtic's best centre-half as well. Do you think there's reasons to be optimistic that once these players come back, Celtic can get right back up the table?
Yeah, I think Giacomakis was on the bench yesterday.
He's on the bench, right?
Well, I think so. It's the first time I've seen Celtic substitutes warm up at Pittodrie and not recognise a single one, other than Tom Rogic. And again, it's a point that Colin touched on our review show, that Celtic's squad's quite small, and they've managed to grind out a result without a full strength team. They've got these quality players that are probably going to be first team players when they return from injury. You look at the likes of, you touched on there, Christopher Julian. He'll probably replace Starfelt. James Forrest working his way back to fitness. There's probably a space for there in midfield. Juranovic, we saw he already started at right back over Anthony Ralston. So the defence is certainly, for Celtic, they've got that depth, but unfortunately their maybe first team players in their defence are currently on the injury table instead. And that's something I think for Celtic going forward, if they can get these players back fit and playing at a consistent level, their area of concern, which has so far been their defence, can only improve. So definitely signs of optimism, but I suppose from a Celtic point of view, you're going to want to see these players back playing sooner rather than later.
Just one final point I want to make on Celtic. David, Joe Hart's been quite an interesting signing, because I think he's definitely a level above what Barkas and Bain have been the past few seasons. And I think he's a very good shot stopper. I mean, we've seen what he's been able to do at Man City in the past. He can be a top goalkeeper, but is playing it out from the back the way Celtic want to just isn't quite working. There's a few occasions where Celtic look a little bit nervous at the back and they tend to pass it to Joe Hart and he's not able to find anyone, and he kicks it out of play. And I think that's quite a concern, because Pep Guardiola got rid of Joe Hart because he's not good at passing the ball with his feet. That's why he brought Ederson in, and Postecoglou wanted a goalkeeper who could do that. And I think there was a lot of concerns coming in that Joe Hart hadn't had that ability. Is that quite a concern, that although he is making the saves that a top keeper should make for Celtic, he made that one where he tipped it onto the bar against Aberdeen in the first half, but is it a concern that he's not able to play out from the back in the way that Postecoglou obviously wants his side to?
I think it's a great point, because I agree with what you're saying, because that was his Achilles heel at Man City, just his inability to play the ball from the back, and it's the same at Celtic. And primarily, if you look at Celtic's infrastructure, philosophy, and their overall defensive system, I don't think they're capable of playing out from the back. Just in the players they've got there. If you're going to play it at the back, you need the players to go and be accustomed to that system, and I don't think Celtic are capable of doing so. So yeah, play the ball out from the back on occasion, but I don't think it works at all times. And there is times where Celtic will have to go battle in order to gain more success, and that's maybe been the wrong doing so far this season, just in games and the way they've conceded goals. Sometimes, yeah, there's been the problems with set pieces, but there's also been the problem where they've played out from the back, and I think against Leverkusen the first night, Celtic were found out to an extent, just in the sense of some of the goals that Leverkusen scored, which ultimately cost Celtic the defeat that they ultimately got in the end.
Paul Cockwell making a good point in there. Hart, head and shoulders above the rest, of course, was the head and shoulders model. But we'll switch to Aberdeen's focus now. And Glenn, I don't like talking about managers in the sense that saying, are they in danger? Could this be the final nail in the coffin, so to speak? But is this a result quite a concern for Stephen Glass? Because I was actually talking to a mate earlier on, and he was pointing out statistics for Aberdeen, and Aberdeen's stats have actually been pretty good in these games. Celtic only had one shot on target. Sorry, 2 shots on target, and they won the game. St Johnstone, when they won 1-0, only had 1 shot on target as well. Aberdeen have dominated possession. Are there signs that it can work under Stephen Glass, or is it at the point now where it's just not going to get better? We need the results now. It's the classic cliche, but football is a results-driven industry.
Yeah, and it's, I'm glad you brought that point up. It's something we've just been, fresh off discussing on the podcast, whether or not the fans will have the patience. Are we seeing what was being proposed from Stephen Glass working? And I think, in the game on Sunday, okay, it took us maybe 40 minutes to actually get into the game. But when we started, getting a stronghold on the game and attacking Celtic and putting them under pressure, we looked the better side. And we've seen that in glimpses this season from Aberdeen, that we're certainly very good with the ball and play a lot more expansive football. But unfortunately, we're not tight enough at the back. 1 clean sheet in 21 games under Stephen Glass is simply not good enough. You're not going to win games if you keep conceding goals. And I think that's an obvious frustration. And you're totally right. Football is a results-based business. And I think Billy Dodd's made a great point on Sports Sound. We can see what Stephen Glass is doing. You can see that on the pitch, but it's whether or not the fans have the patience to put up with the results not going their way. This is actually our worst run of league defeats since 2011. It's the first time we've lost 4 in a row in the league since then. So, it's not great from an Aberdeen point of view. I was laughing because St Johnstone hadn't won a game all season in 90 minutes, played Aberdeen and won. St Mirren looked for their first win of the season and won. Celtic hadn't won away from home in 8 months and won. Our next trip is a trip to Dens Park against a team who haven't won all season. Read into that what you will, but that game suddenly becomes massive from an Aberdeen point of view, but equally a Dundee point of view. We're 5 points ahead of them in the league. Lose that game, and suddenly we're looking over our shoulders instead of up the league. But win that game, and then you're going into a tough set of fixtures against both the Edinburgh sides and Rangers in between with a bit of momentum. So, I've said October is a huge month for Stephen Glass. I think he will see October out. I also touched on that. I think the fact that we're still in the Scottish Cup, he'll be given that competition as well. If we go out of that meekly, then the pressure will definitely intensify and certain questions will be asked. But Dave Cormack backed Stephen Glass heavily in the summer. He's got to get time to see that through. I definitely think he'll get the season, but if results don't start producing come Christmas time, that may swiftly change.
David, Glenn makes a great point there by saying that Aberdeen were heavily backed. Well, Stephen Glass was heavily backed in the transfer window. And if we go back to the start of the season, the results against Hacken, the win against United on day one, the signings that were brought in, some fantastic signings on paper for Aberdeen. Could we have envisaged that it would have gone this way? Because things were looking really bright for Aberdeen. And, signings such as like David Bates just haven't quite made the impact, have they?
Yeah, absolutely. And for Aberdeen, it's just been a terrible predicament that's just gotten worse and worse as time has gone on. They were better yesterday, don't get me wrong. It was a really good performance, and they combined some optimism and character from the response that they got, especially after the break. And it was a good fighting spirit from Aberdeen, especially to get that equaliser, but also at the same time it's another defeat, and as Glenn alluded to there, as a results-driven business. And Dundee, as Glenn alluded to, haven't won in the league this season, which it's a worrying picture. It does make for what we could say a different type of game in 12 days time. So yeah, from an Aberdeen point of view, we couldn't have envisaged this. Aberdeen have got some good players, and like Austin Samuels had a good game yesterday. I'm led to believe, and he was really good in terms of his ability to get the ball and his energy, and he also got in behind Celtic defenders, which was pleasing to see. But also at the other side of this, it's another defeat, and as much as Aberdeen against Old Firm teams, you look at and go, it won't define their season, but yeah, it can define their season, because if they can go and get a victory against Old Firm teams, it's the potential to go and refine and define their season, because if they can go and get that victory against an Old Firm side, or indeed a big side in the Scottish Premiership, you look at this and go and say, bang, we're back in it. And yesterday was that perfect opportunity to go and do that. But it was just they just came up on short in the end, and it's another disappointing game for Stephen Glass's side. I looked at it at the last international period and went, this is an opportunity for Aberdeen to reinstall themselves, because when you looked at the last international calendar, with the exception of the Raith Rovers and the Quarterback games, you were looking at that going, okay, Aberdeen's just had a wee blip, but this blip is just proceeded now. It's steamrolled, yeah, correct. That's a better word, well done. So it's steamrolled, and there's loads of questions in Aberdeen now. And I feel it's far too premature for Stephen Glass to be shown the door, but I would look at Christmas time and go, if we don't beat Dundee moving forward, and then go to the next instalment of quarter, and go, well, we're not progressing, we're not doing well, despite the investment that's been brought into the club, I'd like Dave Cormack and the board to be thinking about looking at ways in which, do you change the management side of things, do you change the structure, loads of questions.
It's definitely lots of questions.
Change the style as well. Maybe Stephen Glass has just got to put his hands up and say, look, we've just got to start winning ugly instead of the expanse of football just now. But I'm just glad that Dundee game's got a 6 o'clock kickoff just now, because might need a few drinks to get through that one.
I think that's a really good point you make as well. It's the style of football's changing, and for a few players who've been at the club for a while, it's something totally different to get used to. But we could be sitting here, if that game finished 1-1 or potentially an Aberdeen win, it could be a totally different story, and Glass would have had the momentum, but finished 2-1 to Celtic in the end, and it's more questions to be asked. The perfect time possibly for an international break for Aberdeen and Glass to have a word with his players, but I don't know. It's hopefully things improve. But I think we better move on to another fixture. And well, I think possibly the second biggest game in terms of quality of teams in the league was Rangers versus Hibs this weekend. And I'm going to ask both of you just straight off the bat here. Glenn first, was a red card for Ryan Porteous? I should say, actually, as a Hibs fan, I do think it was a red card. I'll just get out of the way there. But Glenn, what do you think?
No chance. It's not red for me.
Not red. David?
No, but I can understand why he sent him off, and I'll tell you why. 20 years ago, not a red card, or not even a booking for that matter, I must admit. But the game's evolved over 20 years, and we're coming to a position now where if you try and endanger the opponent, if you try and show a bit of intent, if you try and do things the wrong way, referees are just aligned to showing you cards now. And it is frustrating if you're a manager, or it's frustrating if you're indeed a football fan, because I mean, you don't want an art that's taken away from you. And tackling, and football defending is an art, and that's the thing for me. I mean, it's not a red card, but it's endangering an opponent, and I think that's why they've came to the conclusion that Porteous has been sent off in there. But on Ryan Porteous, and I'll make the point here, he's not winning as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, he's an old school defender. I love the way he plays the game, but also he's not winning from these situations. And unfortunately, we're in 2021 where these situations are getting looked upon, and you're getting sent off for the littlest of things now.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good point as well you made, that 10, 15 years ago they possibly wouldn't even had a look, but now they can just go straight to a red card. And I'm sure if there was VAR, there would have been one of those in slow motion easily as a red card. But Glenn, David made the point there about Ryan Porteous. Now, he still is only 22, but this is his third season being a first choice centre back, and he still is making these mistakes, whether it's a silly pass, just not reading the game, or getting a red card. We know Hibs' biggest issue is their defence at the moment. Is that a concern that Ryan Porteous still isn't learning? I believe Stephen Gerrard made some kind of comment as well about saying, he's not learning or something like that. Is that something that Jack Ross and Hibs need to address?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a cheap jibe from Stephen Gerrard. I think Ryan Porteous gets under Rangers' skins. I don't think there's any need for that comment from Gerrard. I think, the tackling itself, I think, David actually does make a good point in terms of probably the recklessness of it. But I actually thought he won the ball. He barely touches a rebo. And I suppose I'm going to throw it back to you after I answer the other part of your question is, John Lundstrom, lunged in very heavily on Josh Doig, 2 minutes into the game. I don't even think that was brought up as a foul. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that challenge, Struan. But I think Hibs have got to be concerned about Ryan Porteous, because Hibs fans definitely like to talk him up for international when the Scotland squads come around. But I just think he's a bit of a bomb scare. He's always got a mistake in him, and he seems to produce it in these big games. And I suppose you're right, Jack Ross will be getting frustrated that in these big moments, players that Hibs will want to rely on don't perform. And it's, they've maybe got to step up and take responsibility in these big games, maybe mature a little bit. And as David said, learn from these mistakes. But it certainly in isolation, I didn't think it was a red card. But from a Hibs perspective, they'll definitely be hoping that Ryan Porteous can learn from this incident.
Definitely. Hibs have made an appeal as well, I should say, for that red card. On the John Lundstrom thing, actually, one thing that's annoyed me about this game is the fact that all the attention is on the Ryan Porteous red card and nothing is on the John Lundstrom tackle on Doig. Because if Lundstrom makes connection with Doig, I think that's just as bad. He's flying off the ground 2 feet off the air. I don't understand how that's not getting any kind of attention. And if VAR was in Scotland, I think that's a red card. So it's anytime I see talking about the Porteous incident, I want more focus to be on the Lundstrom, because I think that was arguably, well, possibly not worse, but I think it's dangerous. Flying off the ground 2 feet. It's definitely one of those.
Just because it's 2 minutes in, you can't just dismiss it as an early tackle. It's just as reckless as, and it, to bring up the point that David said, it's endangering an opponent, whatever way you look at it.
Yep, definitely. I think the refs had a shocker there in terms of missing that one.
The point I would make as well, Glenn, and I think you've raised a great point there. If that's a sending off or endangering an opponent, we're going to see 6, 7, 8, even double figure more sending offs now moving forward because of endangering an opponent.
Yeah,
definitely.
I think one of my Hibs made a point that that's back-to-back games that Nick Walsh has refereed Hibs Rangers, and in both the games he sent Ryan Porteous off. So either Nick Walsh has got something in for him, but maybe he needs to learn when Nick Walsh is the ref to just calm himself down. But the linesman never even flagged for a foul on that challenge either. So it's purely Nick Walsh has thought that's a red card.
And of course, and you get the argument as well of defenders will be scared to put in a challenge even if they get the ball. But we better talk about the actual football and the game there. David, Hibs started the match really well, when Kevin Nisbet scored. And before the red card, I thought Hibs were playing absolutely fantastic. And then obviously Porteous does get sent off. We know Hibs' biggest issue is their defence. To lose one of their key defenders, Darren McGregor came on. I've no idea what's happening with Nathan Wood, the summer signing from Middlesbrough. But of course, Scott Allen came off in a tactical change. And Rangers just sort of took control of the game, and then in the 60th minute they were rewarded for that. But can Hibs take confidence in the way they played prior to the red card, because they were playing really well at Ibrox with no Hibs fans in the stadium?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if Hibs had repeated how they got on and opened half an hour and continued it for the full 90, I think Hibs would have gotten at least a point from the game. And it's safe to say that the Porteous sending off changed the game, because I mean, Hibs were in full control. They had momentum. They took the lead deservedly, and they were very much the better side. And the send off did change the game, because Rangers got a bit of impetus and reignited Rangers in the way after that sending off. And Steven Gerrard celebrated as although it was a big win. I mean, the last time Gerrard celebrated in that vigour was the Old Firm game back in December 2019. I mean, he did the Rory Roar where he went to all four stands and went, yes, yes, yes. I mean, he's not done that for a long time. And yeah, we've had games where it's been played behind closed doors, but I don't understand why Gerrard had to go and celebrate in the nature he did. I mean, he beat Hibs, right? I understand football management. I understand the pressures of football management, but it was a little bit over the top, if you ask me, if I'm going to be brutally honest with you, because I mean, it was a good victory for Rangers. There was a statement in a way from Rangers, but also the other side, it was a very animated vigour from Rangers. But onto your original point about Hibs, and they'll be up there. They'll be challenging, no doubt about that. And are the title contenders? I still think it's far too early to be judging them as title contenders, because they're going to be defined in games against sides within their vicinity. Yeah, they're also going to be this destined against sides such as your Dundees and your St Mirrens and other things. And Hibs have already dropped points because, like I said, Dundee already this season, so you can judge that as well. But also, they're going to be judged on games against Old Firm. And this assignment was ultimately a defeat, and they never got the outcome they desired. And that'll be the bottom line here. But a lot of positives moving forward. And the Celtic game for Hibs is a big game when you look at it now, because if Hibs can get something out of Celtic, you can look at this and go, okay, it makes things interesting here.
Definitely. Now, I think it's interesting, of course, that Gerrard was celebrating, because that did get a lot of publicity. Obviously, Ryan Porteous' red card got the majority of it. But, Glenn, do you think Gerrard celebrating in that manner sort of suggests Hibs are a really good side, and to get that victory, it obviously was important. We saw in midweek as well with their game against Sparta Prague, he said that he was resting players ahead of the fixture. Is that possibly the best way to describe how Hibs have done this season, is the fact that Gerrard is that delighted to beat them?
Yeah, and I think as well, it was like Rangers made so many changes to their starting lineup on Sunday as well. And, maybe there was pressure given the result that came in from Pittodrie before they kicked off. They knew that, a win took them above Hearts. They'd gone behind. They'd struggled for maybe large periods to break Hibs down as well. I kind of tend to agree with what David said about the celebration being For me, it seemed a bit OTT given how early it is in the season, but it shows how much it meant to Gerrard to get that victory and how important it was.
100%. 100%.
The point you make, Struan's an excellent point, because it just shows how much Hibs are putting pressure on the likes of Rangers and Celtic this season. And I'll include Hearts in there, obviously, as well, being up the right end of the league. That these results are massive in the long game of the season, and that's probably why we saw him celebrate in that manner.
Definitely. And something that I saw actually after this game, which I found very interesting, is that Rangers are only 1 point worse off than they were at this stage last season, which kind of shocked me because they've just not been anywhere near as good. But David, could this be the result to get them back on track? Obviously, we've spoken about Gerrard's celebrations and the way he was acting there, but now they've beaten Hibs, they've beaten Celtic, two of the teams who you would imagine would be up and around the top half of the table. They've still got Hearts to come as well. Is that the confidence sort of back with Rangers, the fact that, they are sort of asserting themselves as the best team in the country?
Yeah, absolutely. And back on Gerrard's celebration very briefly, and that's just a sign of how big a win it was for Rangers yesterday when Gerrard's going and celebrating in the manner he is. I mean, it was a fantastic win for Rangers, and Gerrard has every right and every entitlement to celebrate in the way he did. But it was just a bit of OTT as far as I'm concerned, because we are still in October and there's a long, long way to go in this league season. But back at your original point, Rangers haven't started the season very well. I mean, they're still winning games and not playing well, which is just a sign of where they're at this precise moment in time. Because, I mean, the place at Johnstone, it wasn't exactly pretty. They were pretty suspect at Dens Park last week when they played against Dundee. And yesterday, they were under pressure for opening half an hour, and Hibs were undoubtedly the better side before Porteous got sent off. So Rangers responded and got the win they desired, and that's the good thing. But I mean, Rangers will get this international break to get a balance, and this balance is winning games of football, but also winning games of football by being more entertaining. A bit like repeating the heroics that they did last season, because they got that balance right, spot on last season. They got the balance of winning games of football and remaining undefeated in the league. But also, they did it by playing some fantastic football, and they got deserved plaudits from pundits, fans, even though it was behind closed doors. And Glenn, I think you made a point, if I'm not mistaken, on last week's show, the Rangers were under not under pressure last season because they weren't playing behind closed doors, and sometimes if Rangers aren't doing well, they're probably the first set of fans to proceed and go very toxic on the players. So that's maybe played a part. But for Rangers to keep on this consistent run and get victories, it's just a sign of where they're at compared to where they've been about 2 or 3 seasons ago.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I'll just make one last point. I think Nathan Patterson is a pretty good fullback, and I think the fact that he started over James Tavernier in a big game such as this is very good from a Scotland point of view. But we'll move on now to the...
Can I ask you a quick point on Hibs, from Hibs' point of view? Are you concerned in the manner of goals that they've been conceding this season? Because it's 2 goals from crosses that you conceded in this game, and probably the keeper could have maybe done better around the winner. Well, you touched on there earlier about Porteous improving. Will Jack Ross be worried about Hibs continuing to lose goals from the same source this season?
Yeah, I think so. And from a fan, it's quite frustrating as well to see the same issues coming in. I remember back in the first game of the season against Motherwell, Hibs hadn't conceded from a headed cross all last year, and then instantly 2 in the first game. And I think it's quite concerning that it's the same goals. It's similar to Celtic and set pieces. It's the same thing happening again and again, and it doesn't seem to be cut out. And obviously, Hibs' defence is weak. I don't think there's any doubt in that. But at the same time, different players on the pitch, different players in the park at times, and it's still the same issues. I don't know if there's possibly a bit of adapting that needs to be done with a new keeper. Obviously, Marciano was in net for 4 years. They kind of got to know each other, knew when he'd come out. Matt Macy's coming to a little bit differently. But it is definitely a concern, because anytime a cross gets put into the box, I do wince a little bit because I'm worried about where the ball's going to end up. And a lot of the time it does happen to be in the back of the net. So it's definitely something that Hibs need to improve. And possibly over the international break, that's what the club really need to work on. But I'm hoping that it does get better sooner, because as you say, Celtic can't compete for the title when they're making those kind of mistakes. Hibs can't get anywhere near a title challenge if they're also making silly mistakes like that. But we'll move on to the other side in Edinburgh, who are now the only undefeated side in the Cinch Premiership. Hearts, of course, picked up a victory over Motherwell. David, how good have Hearts been this season? Because on the opening day against Celtic, a lot of people were saying, Celtic weren't up to it. Hearts had momentum coming up, but we're now that far into the season that you can say Hearts are a very good side. Their depth is fantastic. Their midfield, Cammy Devlin and Benny Beningame, are just absolutely fantastic, to be honest. I think that's the best way to sum it up. They are controlling games, dictating play, and everything just seems to be going really well for Hearts and Robbie Neilson at the moment.
They're a side full of energy, a side full of momentum at this precise moment in time, Stu, and there's no other way to put it. I mean, that's another fantastic win over a Motherwell side that started the season very well, and they picked up some good results, Motherwell, so that just signals how good a win it was on Saturday. Hearts started the game off well. Wayne Boyce penalty after 5 minutes, and then one of the goals of the season, in my honest opinion, was Stephen Kingsley net in 22 minutes. Great hit to the net. Maybe Liam Kelly could do a bit better. Would be my constructive criticism from that point of view. But on the other side of this, a good hit by Kingsley all the same. And there's a point really about Hearts right now. And Cammy Devlin, you alluded to him. He's gave Hearts a fresh energy since he's arrived at the club, and he's put a robust Motherwell side into their place at the weekend, as did the rest of the team, and that just shows how Hearts are doing at this precise moment in time. And I think Hearts have got every right to be licking their lips at the prospect of Ibrox in 12 days' time, because you look at Hibs, and we alluded to Hibs, and Hibs tested Rangers and asked questions of Rangers for opening half an hour prior to that. Porteous said it off, and it's the same situation with Hearts. I mean, they've got a Hearts side that have a lot of momentum and a lot of confidence at this moment in time, and they'll go to Ibrox in 12 days' time and go, we're not going to Glasgow just to make up the numbers here. We're going to Glasgow to try and get a win here and make the league table a little bit more interesting. And I mean, Robbie Neilson was heavily criticised last season because he was playing a style of football that won games, but he was also playing a style of football that Hearts fans weren't exactly happy with. And when Hearts competed against Brother Rangers in the Scottish Cup, there was questions, and justified questions towards Robbie Neilson. But in the last few months, he's came in, and it's a delightful contrast to the way they were back in March, and a honour is now enjoying. And as reserved as a church deacon, he is Robbie Neilson, and it's just justified reward for the job he's doing at Tynecastle, because I mean he's doing very well. He'll be able to keep this going, but also they'll not get carried away by the start of the season.
It's quite interesting. I've seen a lot of Hearts fans weren't really too sure. Neilson gradually, become more fond of him as the season has gone on. And what this game also did was Liam Boyce right back up at the top of the Premiership, top goal scorers, level on 6 with Martin Boyle. Glenn, how good has Liam Boyce been? Because obviously we saw how talented he was at Ross County. He moved down south to Burton Albion, and he was pretty decent down there as well. Came back to Hearts, and you can just see how good a striker he is. He did miss a penalty, but I think Liam Kelly was about a metre off his line when he saved it.
Yeah, he was. I made that point on Twitter earlier that you mentioned about VAR in Scottish football. I know the Motherwell fan said if VAR was in football, the penalty wouldn't have been awarded in the first place, but it would have definitely been retaken, because Liam Kelly was about halfway to the penalty spot by the time Boyce hit it. But Hearts have needed an out and out goal scorer, and they've got that. That's them unbeaten at Tynecastle and 3 in a row at Tynecastle without conceding, but they're scoring goals at the other end, and having that consistency and scoring breeds confidence, and Liam Boyce is full of that just now. One of my friends made a point that this Hearts team reminded him of the Derek McInnes team of 2014 to 2016. They've got an energetic midfield, a proven goal scorer up top, and a solid defence. A team that's playing with loads of confidence, Boyce in particular, you touched on there. And we said it last week, how seriously can we take Hearts? Well, they keep proving you've got to start taking them seriously, as hard as it might be to actually say. That they keep proving that they're not to be messed with this season.
It's one of those things, isn't it? You keep saying, Hearts will fall away. Hearts will fall away. And then potentially we get to April and we're thinking, okay, maybe they're not going to fall away there. But David, obviously, this was the second time Motherwell have lost this season after the opening day. Motherwell have been a really, really good side. And of course, that does show how important and impressive that victory is for Hearts. But are Motherwell going to be too disheartened by this result? I think Liam Kelly, obviously, I think he could have done better for some of the goals. Then he did save a penalty, so I guess his confidence has been a bit of a roller coaster after this one. But from a Motherwell point of view, there's still positives to take.
I think it's just an opportunity to go push the reset button, and the international break is an opportunity for Motherwell to go and rectify things. I mean, they picked up, they've had a great start to the season, a terrific win over Aberdeen in particular, drew with St Johnstone, and for me, Van Veen and Tony Watt have strung up a really good partnership up front, but also they've got right at the back as well. Liam Kelly's had a good start to the season. Yeah, he was disappointing on Saturday, but overall, he's had a good start to the season, and they're also a lot more organised defensively, and they've got a bit of stability in the back as well. I mean, Oyala has been a terrific acquisition for me. Just his ability to get in the ball, he does his due diligence at the back, but also he's very good in terms of ball point. He can start an attack immediately, and that's a strong point for Motherwell this season. It allows the likes of Tony Watt, and it allows the likes of Grimshaw to getting the ball immediately and go and expose defenders. And they've shown that already this season, where they've cut teams open very quickly, and the opposition just haven't adapted. So Motherwell have got off to a strong start, and Saturday, I think is just an opportunity to push the reset button and then go again when we resume on October the 16th.
Definitely. And of course, Graham Alexander, I believe, did win Manager of the Month there for Motherwell. So I think that just shows how well he and the team have done as a whole. But Glenn, we'll go back to Hearts here, because after the international break, they've got Rangers coming up. Rangers are the champions, the top of the table, but Hearts are just thereabouts. Will they fancy their chances coming into this game, knowing that Hibs have sort of given a foil that you can get at Rangers? If Porteous never got sent off, Hibs may well have won that game, and Hearts need to be thinking that they're as good as Hibs. If Hibs can do that, then we can do it as well.
Absolutely. And, David alluded to Motherwell's strong start to the season. Motherwell went to Ibrox and grabbed a point as well. So that's two teams that are thereabouts around Hearts at the top end of the table that have gone to Ibrox and caused plenty of problems. This Hearts side is full of confidence right now. They will, and as David, he made the same point, they will not fear going to Ibrox at all. And they will go there, and I think as many teams do, with nothing to lose really. Any point you gain at Ibrox or Parkhead for teams, I feel, is seen as a bonus really in terms of the league. And if Hearts were to get a result at Ibrox and when the league season gets back underway, that'll be a real statement of intent to the rest of the league, but also for themselves and their fan base, who, for those of you that maybe watched The View from the Terrace when it returned to TV, Hearts fans are getting very confident already, Mr. Joel Sked in particular. So that will only do anything for their confidence if they get a positive result at Ibrox.
I think as well, if Hearts do get a victory over Rangers, I think that genuinely could put a few people in contention to say, yeah, Hearts could actually challenge for this title, because that would be a massive statement. But we'll move on from that game as well, and we'll go to St Johnstone Dundee, because this game was pretty ridiculous. David, you put on your Twitter as well, Dundee scored a goal and St Johnstone scored 3 goals. Two things that just haven't happened this season. I think that is Dundee doubling their goal tally for the season as well with that one. So David, how significant a result is this for St Johnstone? We'll start with them before we move on to Dundee, but 3 goals, Chris Kane with 2, Stevie May with 1 of them. It's what they've been lacking all season, and suddenly they got 3 at once.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to start by saying I'll need to clarify this. I'm on my phone, so excuse me, but I'm going to clarify by saying Johnston. That's the first time they scored 3 goals at home under Carl Davidson, which just tells you everything you need to know about how well they did. It was the first time Saints have won a game at home by 2 goals. Under Carl Davidson, which just tells you everything you need to know about how good they were at the weekend. One thing that was pivotal in the outcome of this game was the fact they went down the right for all 3 goals concerned. Dundee played a 3-5-2 on Saturday and it didn't work. I mean, they played a 3-5-2 against Rangers and it worked to T. I mean, they nearly got a point out of the game just to come off some missing a penalty in that game in question. But looking back on Saturday, it was the wrong formation from a Dundee point of view. Johnston exposed it at every opportunity. Michael O'Hara was superb for me, and he was playing in the right wing back position, and that just allowed him to go and drive forward at all occasions. And Ali Crawford and Sean Rooney were 2 players that allowed O'Halloran all time and space in the ball, and then O'Halloran set up 2 goals for May and Kane. And for the May predicament. It was a ball in which he played into Stevie May 30 seconds into the second half, and May just guided the ball home with a cute finish past Legstons, and it was a very good performance from a St Johnstone point of view. St Johnstone have been known or renowned in the past for playing a Route 1 style football, but that certainly wasn't the case the weekend. They were playing fantastic style, got the ball into channels. They've usually been accustomed, St Johnstone, to playing David Witherspoon and Callum Booth and then playing from there. But St Johnstone transitioned on Saturday and got like Stevie Main and Halloran involved, and it worked a trick. I mean, a lot's been made of Chris Kane not scoring goals or not scoring enough goals for that matter, but he definitely scored goals on Saturday and got 2, and he delighted Carl Davison. And May and Kane has the capabilities to be a strong partnership. Saturday we've seen the symptoms of that, but we need more up front from Kane and May, and if we can see that, St Johnstone will be flying.
It's definitely the argument that people have said, if St Johnstone had that 20-30 goal a season striker, they'd be competing for the title because they are missing it. But Glenn, we'll switch over to Dundee now because obviously they scored a goal, but it was nothing but a consolation. They were already 3-0 down, and a lot of people have said that Dundee's squad is a championship squad, and when you look at it on paper, it just doesn't look good enough to compete for the Premiership. Players like Lee Griffiths have come in, but obviously he's injured now. Jason Cummings, you don't quite know how well he's going to play in. And Charlie Adams, of course, being injured is no help to anybody. But is this going to be a concern for Dundee purely on the fact that their squad just isn't up to the standard of the Premiership?
Yeah, and for as good as St Johnstone were in the game on Saturday in terms of an attacking sense, if I was a Dundee fan, I'd be alarmed at some of the defending that took place surrounding the goals conceded. And yeah, they've got to be concerned that not only are they not scoring, okay, they scored on Saturday, but I know David has covered a lot of Dundee games this season, but for the chances that they create, they're not taking the opportunities, but they're also conceding as well. And after the international break, they've got 2 of their next 3 home games at home. I think it's Ross County after playing Aberdeen at home, and they've got to be targeting these games as opportunities to pick up points, because if they don't, and it's only October, but Dundee and their fans must be thinking they are in serious trouble. I know they've been unlucky with Charlie Adam obviously being injured, a pivotal player for them, but they've gone and signed what they hoped would be experience, but it's not worked. Either the players haven't gelled, or James McPake is not getting what he wants to implement across to these players. And yeah, it's a sad state of affairs because they do add something to the league. It's great to have a Dundee derby in the top division, but if you can't produce a squad good enough for the league, then you've only got yourself to blame when you find yourselves at the wrong end of the table.
Can I just make a point by saying McPake spoke to us after the game on Saturday, went and says that players aren't getting time off during the international break, and I can kind of understand where McPake's coming from here, because there's a lot to work on. They're struggling to score goals. Is there an attacking force at the back? They're very, very much exposed. There's a lot to go work on. Charlie Adam needs to be back sooner rather than later, as far as I'm concerned, because they're missing his guidance, they're missing his leadership, but most importantly, they're missing his distribution in terms of crosses. And there's a lot to worry about from a Dundee point of view. And James McPake was understandably hurt at the weekend, but I don't think it's right I disagree with any Dundee fan that wants him gone, because he's went through poor patches in the past and responded in the right manner, and he needs to do this again.
I think you've summed that up perfectly there, David. Of course, in last season there was a similar point for Dundee where things weren't quite going the way they were hoping, and it did turn around. So they'll definitely be hoping that they can find a way to get their form going. But as Glenn said there, David, you've covered Dundee quite a few times this season. How do you think they can turn this around with the players on the pitch? Do you think they've got the players in that squad who can, change a game? Obviously, the injury to Lee Griffiths as well wasn't good for anybody, really, the timing of it. But if he can come back, can they get better, essentially, is what I'm trying to say.
Can I start with Griffiths by saying it was maybe a blessing in disguise in a way that Lee Griffiths didn't play on Saturday, because you've got to look at the long-term picture and go, he's not going to be playing for a while once the October the 14th outcome is concluded, because he'll probably be getting a big ban as it is. But onto the team as a whole, and yeah, there is a lot to worry about right now. And if I'm going to be brutally honest with you by saying I've watched enough of Dundee to go and tell the both of you is that I don't think Jason Payton knows what his best 11 is. He's putting players in the park just for the sake of putting players in the park, as far as I'm concerned. Because he's got Jason Cummings back, and Julian Sheridan did well when he came on up front Saturday for Dundee, but also at the back, there's a big question mark right now with regards to the formations and things like that. Because I mean, they play against Rangers, they play against St Johnstone, they played a 3-5-2, and it worked for the former. It worked against Rangers. But also, when they played against like some Motherwell and Hibs, they've played a different formation. So it sounds to me as although McPake, because of the players they don't have available at this moment in time, he's struggling to find his best formation because he's missing Charlie Adam at this moment in time. And that's what I'm saying. They need Adam back sooner rather than later. But Charlie Adam was on his... He'll disagree with this, but he's on his last legs in terms of football because he's not getting younger. And if you're relying on a 36-year-old Charlie Adam to take you out in the mud, there's serious questions got to be asked. And the Glenn's made a great point regarding Dundee. They are great to watch in the Premiership because Dundee Derby brings great commercial interest to the Scottish game. From an Aberdeen persuasion, going to Dens Park and Tannadice in particular is absolutely brilliant. It brings a great away day to Aberdeen fans. Old Firm clubs love an away day to Dundee, and I just hope they can turn this predicament and rectify what's been going wrong. Because I mean, they picked up a great Premier Sports Cup victory over Motherwell, and they played well against Hibs as well. It was just the defensive errors and what we could say a controversial penalty, which led to Hibs getting a point at Dens Park on that day in question. And ever since probably that day, ever since the Fir Park assignment when they beat 1-0, they've played okay, but it's just been a disappointing picture. And Saturday, Dundee have been known for playing very good football, but just not getting that goal. It was the complete opposite the weekend, and that's a worry.
Definitely, and that's, of course, as you say, if you're relying on a 36-year-old to come back in midfield to carry the team, it's definitely not great. But Dundee's neighbours, Dundee United, who have been a much better team in the Premiership this season so far under Tam Courts, picked up another victory, a 1-0 win over Ross County. But unfortunately, this game has been overshadowed by a racist incident, of course. Allegedly, Ross County fans giving racial abuse to Fuchs on the United team. And at the end of the game, Tam Courts, or Thomas Courts, I'm not quite sure what he wants to be known as at the moment. Tam Courts, we're going to stick with that one, held up the no room for racism and show racism the red card t-shirt. And I think it's just terrible once again that we are seeing these incidents in the sport. Ross County have released a statement about it, and it's just a shame because obviously, it's totally overshadowed the incident, and it still obviously is a clear issue.
Yeah, it's a shame that we should really say alleged incident at this time, given there's an investigation going on, and the really strong defence that Ross County have come out in response to the incident. But it is a shame that it is overshadowed what is another great victory for United, their fourth 1-0 win of the season, and really builds on the positive results they've had so far this season. But yeah, it's not nice. We don't like to see these sort of things happening in football in general, let alone Scottish football. And whatever the outcome of the investigation is, we definitely condemn that sort of behaviour.
Definitely, I should have said at the beginning it was alleged. There is an investigation ongoing about that at the moment. But David, how well has Tam Courts done with United so far this season? Because a lot of people had doubts coming in about his ability and the team, but he's proven a lot of people wrong, hasn't he?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just having to get my notes just to answer this question because just so I can get a name right for you. But anyway, no, fantastic victory for Dundee United in the weekend, and it's just a reward for the job Tam Courts is doing because, I mean, Dundee United are the second lowest scorers in the league this season, but also they're very good in terms of keeping clean sheets. That's clean sheets against Ross County, Rangers, Hibs. I've forgotten the others. Dundee, yeah. So it just speaks volumes to the job that Tam Courts is doing defensively, but also they've got an organisation up front as well. I mean, a lot of questions were raised about whether Dundee United would go and score goals after Lord Shanklin depart from the club, and Niskanen took his goal really well at the weekend, and he's been called up to the Finland squad just because of his performances in recent weeks, and he's done very well for himself, and he's came across from Germany and just been a breath of fresh air at the Tannadice side, because I mean, he didn't get much playing time in Germany, and he's came to Dundee United, and did very well for himself. But he's actually not got a flat. He actually told the written press at the weekend he's actually not got a flat in Dundee yet. He's staying in an apartment, which I don't know how that's obviously working. But his prerogative at this precise moment in time will be deal with a World Cup qualification period coming up because he's been called up to the Finland squad, and understandably so. But on to Tam Courts, and that's another good victory for Tam. And I mean, it was Liam Fox that spoke to the media at the weekend, just because Tam, I think, was getting in the middle of obviously the racism incident that is alleged, of course. So here's hoping we can get to the end of this sooner rather than later. But as of obviously the game in question, another good win against a Ross County side that I made the point to Tam before the game on Thursday in the pre-match press conference that you're playing a Ross County side at the weekend that a good football side maybe doesn't show in performances externally, but internally he was making the point that Ross County are a good side, and Ross County did have opportunities, which just shows how organised Dundee United are at the back at this moment in time. But also that they're getting goals, and this going to do very well. Dundee United are close. I don't know if it might be agreed. Obviously, we're far too busy for me to go and check right now. But they're in talks to sign Maxine Biamu, who is a free agent after leaving Coventry. And Dundee United are confident, of course, of getting this deal done before we return to action. And Biamu is a player that doesn't score. He is not a main scorer, but he does score goals, and his work rate is 110% every week. So it has the possibilities of being a very good signing for Dundee United. And Dundee United do need a striker, and if they can get a striker, not of Lawrence Shankle's level, but if somebody as close to Shankland, then they won't be doing much wrong. And Biamu would be a good signing. Not a goal scorer as such, but then I don't think Dundee United need a goal scorer to fix problems, because they've got a good team, they've got a good system as it is.
Definitely, and I think that's a really important point, the fact that they are keeping goals out. You know, they might not be scoring so many at the moment, but they're keeping clean sheets. If they can add a goal-scoring striker, similar to the point I made on St Johnstone, they could be a really top side. But we'll just quickly finish here, just while we've got time, between Livingston and St Mirren. St Mirren picked up a 1-0 victory over this one. Mm-hmm. Glenn, is this a concern that Livingston have once again failed to score? You know, 2 weeks ago we were talking about how it could be the turnaround of their season after beating Celtic. Then they were very badly beaten by Hearts, and once again at the weekend beaten by St Mirren. Is this a concern that David Martindale just can't seem to get the team going? I mean, I don't think it's all on him. They just can't seem to put the ball in the back of the net.
No, and it's funny, we talked about that a few weeks ago, about how do Livingston back up their result against Celtic. They've not really done it, have they? They've gone on, back-to-back defeats without scoring.
Backwards almost.
Yeah, and it's they've only scored 3 league goals this season. And they're struggling to keep clean sheets as well. I know many of you that are tuning in will think it's rich that an Aberdeen fan is speaking about another team that can't keep clean sheets. But Livingston and Martindale, prided themselves on their defensive stability last season. John Guthrie was obviously a big part of that. He departed in the summer. Maybe they haven't replaced him to that level, but yeah, there's big concerns for Livingston, especially on the goal scoring situation, because they need to have that turned around and quick. And I touched on about Dundee having an important run of fixtures, Livingston as well. It's how these teams kick on after the international break, because Livingston play Ross County in the second game back from the international break. Playing teams in and around yourselves, they'll be disappointed to lose. They'll probably view that game against St Mirren as an opportunity to gain ground on the buddies, but have failed to do so. But on the other hand, I suppose from a St Mirren point of view, they've gone and backed up their result that they got against Aberdeen by putting in another good performance to get 3 points against Livingston.
Definitely, and a lot of people have now said after this result that, and the other results this weekend, that we seem to have a bottom 3 forming of Livingston, Dundee and Ross County still all searching for their first wins. But we'll quickly finish on St Mirren here, David. How big a victory was that for Jim Goodwin? That's now back-to-back victories for his side.
Well, it's funny how a victory over Aberdeen could go and reignite your season, because, I'm sorry, Glenn, I didn't mean that in a bad way, but...
It's all right, Dundee fans know what they've got to look forward to in a few weeks.
Exactly. No, but fantastic victory for St Mirren. That's their season up and running now. They'll lie in the top 6. I mean, when you look at the league table as a whole, you've got an underachieving Aberdeen side. You've got Dundee, Ross County and Livingston that won't do much. So St Mirren have got every right to be dreaming of top 6 football, and they came organisally close in every department last season. I mean, it was the last day before the split where They got a 1-1 draw against Hamilton, which cost them a top 6 place. They were in 2 semi-finals and just came up short against Livingston and Johnstone respectively. So St Mirren have got every bit of confidence to go and push on now. I think Jim Greenwell learned a lot out of last season, and Livingston threw the towel at St Mirren stages in this game on Saturday, but St Mirren defended resolutely and got the job done, which just speaks volumes of how they are defensively. And they've got some top players, and they've got the likes of Jamie McGrath, Joe Shaughnessy, Conor Ronan, and shielded by their own power. So they've got an abundance of players in their team, and if they can bring in 1 or 2 players in the January transfer window to cement what they've got, then it always speaks positivity as far as I'm concerned for St Mirren. But I mean, they've not got off their greatest starts. But then when you look at games in the early stages of the season, there's a lot of permutations in the game, such as penalties or if decisions not going their way. St Mirren are finally getting the rubber of the green they desired, and it's good for them to get 2 wins in a row now.
Definitely, and that could be the kickstart to their season. Possibly playing Aberdeen as the way to get going, and Celtic might suddenly put on a title charge here. It could be exactly what's needed. And of course, I'll probably end up with egg in my face when Ross County, Livingston, and Dundee win next weekend when we return from the international break. But I'd just like to thank David and Glenn for joining me tonight. Thankfully, the stream didn't go down again. I don't know if Facebook or Instagram are back up, but luckily we've been here, and hopefully we should be back again at not the same time. We should be back at 6 tomorrow night, our regular viewing time. But yeah, I'd just like to thank you two for joining me, and we'll catch you next time.
I could just clarify, by the way, before we go, but Facebook is very much still down.
Still down, right?
Hallelujah.
Enjoy your nights away from Facebook, everybody. See you next time.